question is a great question, because one of the things that I have always done since I was elected was to meet with my constituents. And I can tell you that within the first 100 days, again, I will ensure that we have a public consultation on pre-budget, because I want to hear from the people of Newmarket, Aurora, to ensure that their voice is heard in Ottawa.
Thank you very much.
So thanks for that question, Peter. My answer isn't that dissimilar for Lois, and I actually did say it yesterday too on the Rogers debate, and it was taped, so if anyone doesn't believe me, they can watch it there. But I want to hold in the first 10 or 15 days of becoming a member of Parliament, local town halls and hear about issues and whatever sort of priorities that the people of Newmarket and Aurora have, and get those meetings done as quickly as possible, and get a good sense of what's on everybody's mind as soon as we get in there.
Thank you very much.
So I think within the first maybe 30 days instead of 100 days, I would definitely want to be back in the riding and doing that kind of not pre-budget consultation, because I think that takes us too far down the road, but just to hold meetings with people, with specific groups who have interests in that need to be supported, such as small business. And my passion is to really increase the engagement of youth in this riding, so I would want to meet with youth who have been either marginalized or have decided for whatever reason that they have lost an interest in or never took interest in politics, because I feel like they are the ones that we need to really reach out to. And I really would like to make a point of engaging youth so that we can start to plan for an economy locally here that will include them.
What will the candidates do to restore this outrageous practice to give our scientists a free rein in Parliament?
Thank you. This one starts with you.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Bill. We will certainly unmuzzle our scientists. I think scientific research is always subject to peer review. It's ongoing. It's a living sort of organism, and we need to muzzle them. Let them talk about their studies freely, and don't let them have repercussions of doing things that normally they're entitled to, and that is open and fair, free discussion by scientists.
Thank you. Yvonne?
Well, absolutely. I think it's straightforward. You have to undo the practices that have been brought in under this current government that do restrict scientists from talking to the media, to talk about the reports and the research that they're doing. I think the other thing that we need to do is restore the funding that's been cut for hundreds of research and innovation. Stymied the work that scientists can do. So it's a funding issue, it's a restoring them to a place where they can actually talk and share what they've learned, and actually bringing back people that we've lost.
Thank you very much. And Lois?
Well, thank you, but I actually reject the premise of the question, because we've had record investments in science and technology. We have scientists who provide thousands of interviews every year, and they lecture globally every year as well. I would invite you to take a look at one of the recent interviews done by CBC by one of our scientists, Dr. Jeff Smith from Ottawa. Do you know we've provided over $11 billion in new funding? It includes research at the Freshwater Institutes in Winnipeg and the Bayfield Institute in Burlington. We've constructed a dozen laboratories and 3 science vessels. Those vessels are responsible to do the mapping of our Arctic, which is going to inform Canada's contribution to UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And so today, I'd like to say congratulations, first of all, to Arthur MacDonald, who is our newest Nobel Prize winner, Canadian scientists, including my own son-in-law, who came from Ghana with a master's in physics, did his doctorate in electrical engineering.
Okay, thank you very much.
I would like to pose a question about, do you think that a party that received 39% of the votes should have 100% of the deciding power in the parliament? Conversely, do you think that maybe a party that receives 39% of the vote should only receive 39% of the seats in the parliament?
Okay, so the answer to that question from the NDP is quite clear. We're the only party that is prepared to introduce a new electoral system in Canada that will be more fair, that will make sure that everybody's vote counts. It's called mixed member proportional. It's been studied the world over. It's been recommended to Canada as the best system for our country, given the size and the demographics and the population. So we will absolutely bring that in. And an example for a region the size of York Region, where we have 10 ridings now, that would look like people's votes counting by percentage, so that if you had 6 NDP or 6 Liberals and 2 Conservatives, you would be sure to have at least the NDP and Green Party's voters represented, because you're basing the representation on the proportion of the vote that you get. It's ludicrous that 39% of the vote across Canada would enable a government to be able to make all the decisions and have a majority government. We absolutely believe that that system's time is come and gone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the question. I think it was Eric. I hope I heard your name correctly. You know, the first past the post system has served us well for 150 years, and it's actually the system that is used by the 3 oldest democracies in the world. So we are going to continue to support that. The one thing about mixed member proportional representation is that it takes away the accountability of the member of parliament to its own constituents, because they're appointed by the leader of that party, and we do not believe that that is fair representation.
Thanks for that question, Eric. And we are very open-minded on this topic. We have a great democratic reform policies in our platform. I urge you to check it out on realchange.ca. But the crux of that position is that we're going to strike an all-party committee to review all forms of voting, including ranked ballot, mixed proportional representation, maybe even examine ways we can implement online voting, or consider whether or not voting should be mandatory like it is in some jurisdictions. But we're open to examining all these without prejudging any of the possible solutions and come up with a solution that works for all. But we're committed to changing the first past the post if that's the decision of the committee. Thank you very much.
So what would you be doing to help better the legislation for the Rouge National Park that is serving the GTA?
Thank you very much for that question, and we are going to start with Kyle.
Well, thanks for that question. And I think, like sort of the Liberal Party, that the national parks are gems of the country. Actually, in 2017, we want to make admission to all national parks free for that special year in Canada's history. But specifically for the park, the Rouge Park there, we want to make sure that the federal government is funding it, making sure it's a national park and getting it the status that it deserves, and we look forward to working together with all the stakeholders to achieve that end. And that's a great piece of geography there, great piece of landscape in Scarborough.
Thank you. It goes to Yvonne Furt next.
So I believe it's a couple of questions in the environmental realm. So one is national parks, and we definitely believe that they need to be funded properly. They're one of our legacies that we're passing on to our next generation. I think the other thing we need to look at is restoring protections to our lakes and rivers, which have drastically been removed. We need an environmental assessment act that's actually going to do its job when it comes to assessing projects, whether it's pipelines or anything else. We need to have those rigorous environmental assessment tools available, and we need to restore those. And I think curbing greenhouse gases, putting a cap on carbon emissions, any of the things we can do to reduce that impact on the environment will also be critical, and we're committed to doing that.
Compliment, because it was our government that created the Rouge Urban National Park. It's the first of its kind in Canada. It's 10 times the size of Central Park in New York, and it is a piece of property that is going to be conserved in perpetuity. But you know, we also created the Nahanni National Park, which is the largest reserve of its kind in the world, and it is protecting species at risk. It is protecting the property of our Aboriginal peoples, and it is protecting the lakes and streams in that area as well. You know, we're working with our partners, the Nature Conservancy of Canada. I was privileged to stand on property in King Township that is area where I grew up, that is now going to be conserved for future generations to be able to enjoy. We also work with another partner, Ducks Unlimited, who identifies sensitive areas, and we are working with them with funding to ensure that those sensitive lands are kept and
Okay, thanks very
preserved.
much, Lois. So we're ready to go.
A couple of weeks ago, your party leader, Mr. Mulcair, stated that he plans to withdraw Canada's military commitment to the airstrikes against ISIS. We're talking the ISIS terrorist organization that is clearly committed to our destruction. My question is, why would this be a just policy to do? Consider the fact that ISIS has clearly stated that they want to destroy
Okay,
us.
thank
Our
you very
country's
much.
security is
You've got the
crucial.
question now, and
So it is a complicated question. There's no doubt about that. But here's the thing. We can be more effective in these global situations if we take the stance that we've always taken, which is to be involved in peacekeeping and not involved in bombing. Because if you want to look at the Syrian situation, it's actually the Syrian government that's actually killing more people in that country than ISIL. And I'm not trying to take away at all from their impact. But if we take sides in that particular war, who is our enemy? Like, you tell me. And I do not for a moment accept the fact that we are under threat as much as we are now that Mr. Harper has almost painted a target on us, because he's decided who his enemies are. And I feel that we can play a much more effective role if we say Canada will come in and we will work with those who need to be supported. We will take the refugees that we need to do, because that's the humanitarian and the right thing to do. But I do not accept that the only role that we should have is to be bombing people, and we know some of the things that have happened in the last few days where innocent people are being killed. So this is not a black and white issue, but yes, we will remove our troops from that war, and we will find another more effective and efficient and
Okay, thank you
humanitarian
very
way
much,
to help
Mike.
people in that region.
I'm going to now...
Question is, what will your government, specifically the Liberal and the NDP government, do to bring back environmental protection and increase environmental protection, and the Liberal government
Okay,
with
thank you very much. I
infrastructure,
think we
what
got
will
the
you...
question. I'm sorry, the question is now, so what will the governments do to increase protection of the environment? Your parties.
Infrastructure.
And it is Lois's turn to start first.
Thank you very much. Well, you know, we are the only party are the only government that has ever lowered greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. When we took office, with the Kyoto Accord having been signed by the Liberals, Michael Ignatieff said to Stéphane Dion, who was the environmental minister for the Liberals, we didn't get it done. And he's right, they didn't, because they signed the Kyoto Accord and then allowed emissions to grow by 33%. We took a very unpopular position in 2006. We said that if there is ever going to be a real drop in greenhouse gas emissions, that we need all the major emitters at the table. Kyoto only had 26% of the emitters. We signed the Copenhagen Agreement because 86% of the major emitters were at the table, and we're making a difference. We're going to go to Paris a leader because we are meeting our targets. We took on a sector-by-sector approach, starting with the most difficult, which is the transportation sector, and we have reduced those greenhouse gas emissions
Your minute is up. Your minute is up. Thank you. Your minute is up. And I'd now like to move on to Kyle.
Liberal government.
Ma'am, thank you very much.
Thank you for that
Take a seat.
question.
And Kyle, we'll let you have a shot at this question.
Well, thank you for the question. And I'm going to play Michael Ignatieff for a minute, and Lois, and you can play Mr. Dion. I'm calling yours in the house, but I'm going to... Lois, you didn't get it done. You didn't get it done. No, those were done. The reductions she talks about in 2007, 2008 are from two factors. The global recession in 2000...
I'm sorry.
2007. I did engage your side.
Yes, sure. Thank you.
I thought she wanted to play Mr. Dion. 2007, 2008 was a global recession. Of course, emissions are going to go down. At the same time, Ontario closed its coal plants. So those two factors are what led to the greenhouse gas emissions in Canada and that range. environment. And the point is, we want to work with our provincial partners to make sure we lower greenhouse gas emissions, and we're going to invite the provincial environment ministers to the Paris conference and work together to put a price on carbon and make sure we lower greenhouse gas emissions. And we want to work with the provinces. Different provinces right now have different systems. We're not going to dictate which ones work or which ones don't. Let's use best practices based on their manufacturing.
Okay, thank you very much, Kyle. Appreciate it.
I think the NDP has a really strong position on this. We are the only party that's going to introduce a cap and trade system that puts a price on carbon. The Liberals have not wanted to step into this fray, and we see it as a federal responsibility. We can do a lot more to reduce and to retrace our steps on this portfolio if we do it as a federal mandated system. We also want to develop a national water strategy because we're really afraid that we live in a world now with trade deals that we're signing that we don't even really understand if our water is going to belong to us, if it's going to be a public resource for much longer. So we need to have a water strategy that makes sure that our water is maintained as a public resource and is not. This is because Tom was a minister of the environment in Quebec, and he stood his ground on issues that involve developers where it would have been much easier to say.
Thank you very much, Yvonne.
So we have an incredible leader that will lead this portfolio.
It's what is your party going to do to help small business in York Region?
Thank you very much. And Kyle, I believe you're first up on this one.
Well, there's no, thanks for that question, by the way. Andrew, I think it was. Small business is, of course, an important engine, especially in communities like Newmarket. And the Newmarket Chamber, I think, does a great job of helping promote their interests and their needs. But I want to continue the dialogue, work together. There's not a one-size-fits-all for small businesses, I don't think. The businesses are, although titled small businesses, there are varying sizes and varying degrees. But I think to create the conditions where there's a market for goods or services is a start. To do that, we got to invest in our country and in Canadians. So to do that, we'll of course we'll do so. But working together with small businesses is key, and it's a job driver. And small businesses in Newmarket and Aurora are especially important to the economy.
Yvonne?
I would agree with that. The small businesses are absolutely critical right across Canada. So we have planned to reduce small business taxes by 2%, which will allow for them to grow and develop, and also apply innovation funding so that small businesses can really meet the growing needs of their own economy. The only thing I would take issue with in terms of Mr. Peterson's remarks is that his leader is the one that actually doesn't necessarily trust that small businesses are going to use that money in the best way, because he made some really difficult comments to hear a couple weeks ago about small businesses and many wealthy people just wanting to cash in on tax cuts, claiming to be small businesses. So I really take issue with that, because we need to really invest in our small businesses, and I'd like Kyle to have a conversation with Justin and let him know that that's not the truth, and maybe we need to bring him out to some small businesses in Newmarket or Aurora to meet them.
That's not what he said. I have that conversation.
Well, thank you very much, and Mr. LaRue, thank you for the question, because small businesses are the ones who create most of the jobs in our community, and we need them to be healthy if we are going to have a healthy economy, and most importantly, Deborah, a healthy Chamber of Commerce. So we are committed to helping them grow and succeed. You know, we did reduce the small business tax from 12% to 11%, and we said that under a re-elected Conservative government, it will go down to 9%. We're very hopeful that the NDP will support that in our next legislation. We introduced the small business tax credit. We lowered small business payroll taxes. One of the most job-killing things that we see is payroll taxes. Well, we've reduced those by 15% for 2 years. We invested $15 million in internships, and we maintained the freeze on EI premiums. One of the other things that people talk to me about is the red tape, and I was privileged to be appointed to the Red Tape Reduction Committee in 2011.
Thank you very much, Phyllis.
These are paper feathers. And the green cat